Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a really vital overview of Lesson 8 from the Christian Care Mentor course, which is all about boundaries. You know, that word itself can sound kind of clinical, right? Especially when we're talking about the deeply compassionate, sacred work of Christian caregiving. You're pouring your heart out, walking alongside these informal caregivers, and you absolutely want to be there for them. But how do you do that without completely losing yourself in their journey? Let's get right into it. Let's start by stepping into the shoes of a mentor named Jack. So Jack was mentoring Paul, a guy caring for his wife who had advanced Parkinson's. Their conversations were incredibly raw, and naturally, Jack felt super honored by Paul's trust. At first, Jack welcomed every single phone call, day or night. He basically thought that total 24/7 availability was the ultimate expression of Christian love. But over time, things shifted. Jack started getting this tight knot of anxiety in his chest whenever his phone buzzed. He couldn't sleep because he kept replaying Paul's struggles on a loop in his head. And whenever Jack tried to just sit down and take a breather, this exact thought would creep in. If I don't answer, who will help him? If you have ever felt that overwhelming, crushing sense of over-responsibility, trust me, you are absolutely not alone. What Jack was experiencing was the sheer anxiety of blurred lines. During one particular call, Paul actually asked Jack to make a major medical decision for his wife's care. Suddenly, Jack felt this massive weight slipping right onto his shoulders, a weight he was quite literally never meant to carry. When we blur the lines of our role like that, it leads straight to emotional exhaustion. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you care less. Actually, it means you're making sustainable care possible. By resetting that boundary, Jack didn't distance himself from Paul at all. He was actually protecting the space where real, healthy mentoring could take place.
Okay, moving into Section 1. Redefining Sacred Boundaries. Jesus and the Protective Fence.
We really need to completely redefine how we look at boundaries, moving away from seeing them as unloving and instead seeing them as profound spiritual wisdom. The crucial point here emerges in Luke 5:16, which says, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." I mean, really think about that. Jesus, the ultimate caregiver, right, intentionally set limits on his availability. He did not meet every single demand placed on him. He withdrew to stay grounded in God's will. And that completely removes any shame we might feel about stepping back to recharge. Boundaries aren't unloving at all. They actually keep our service rooted in God instead of just being driven by guilt.
This brings up a really perfect illustration from the ministry framework. A lot of times, we mistake boundaries for walls, rigid defensive structures built to block people out and isolate ourselves. But healthy mentoring boundaries are actually much more like fences. A fence is a protective structure. It lets the sunlight in, you can easily chat right over it, but it very clearly defines where your yard ends and your neighbor's begins. It creates a safe, defined space where trust, honesty, and genuine care can actually flourish, without all those weeds of confusion or burnout completely choking the relationship.
Which brings us to Section 2, Defining Your Mentor Role, What You Are and Aren't.
Galatians 6:5 reminds us that each of you should carry your own load. And to do that effectively, we absolutely need role clarity. Think of this distinction as a permission slip to just step back. A mentor is a compassionate listener. You're a peer with lived experience, a source of encouragement, and a guide pointing toward resources. And wow, that is such a beautiful, vital calling. But a mentor is not a professional counselor or a medical or legal advisor, and you are certainly not a rescuer. We really have to give ourselves permission to let go of that intense need to fix a situation or cure someone's loved one. We are there to walk right alongside them, not to carry the heavy, life-altering decisions that ultimately belong to them.
All right, Section 3, Ground Rules and Red Flags, Setting Expectations.
So how do we practically build these fences? Well, the very best way to prevent rule confusion is by setting up a clear structure right from day one. You've got to establish some essential ground rules early on. Things like, how often are you meeting and for how long? What's the best way to get in touch? Are we texting, calling, emailing? And what exactly are the limits around confidentiality and safety? Setting this up doesn't create some rigid, robotic relationship. It actually brings incredible peace. Just like 1 Corinthians 14:33 reminds us, God is a God of peace, not disorder. When both you and the caregiver know exactly what to expect, anxiety just plummets and the mentoring relationship can really thrive.
But let's be real, even with the best ground rules, we can drift. So you need to watch out for these boundary red flags. Is the caregiver getting a bit overly dependent? Are you finding yourself emotionally exhausted? Or maybe saying yes entirely out of guilt rather than having genuine capacity? Are your roles starting to blur? Or are you maybe neglecting your own physical health? Proverbs tells us to guard our hearts, so recognizing these warning signs isn't something to feel ashamed about. They're literally just your dashboard engine warning light. They're reminding you to pull over, pray, and preserve your ability to love well over the long haul.
Let's look at Section 4, the grace of saying no. Grace in action.
So what happens when you actually hit one of those red flags and you need to push back a little? We really need to talk about the grace of saying no. Consider this raw plea from a role-play scenario right out of the course. Linda, who is caring for her mother with dementia, is completely overwhelmed by all the medical options. She looks at our mentor, Paul, and pleads, "You've been through this. I just wish you'd tell me what decision to make." Honestly, this is exactly what a heavy, boundary-crossing request sounds like in real life. It's born totally out of desperation, and everything inside you might be screaming to just give her the answer so you can end her pain.
But notice exactly how Paul, the care mentor, responds here. He says, "I care about you, but I can't make medical decisions for you. What I can do is help you think through the options." I mean, that is just masterful. Paul models perfectly how to kindly, graciously reset a boundary. He affirms his care, he clearly states his limitation without over-apologizing for it, and then he pivots right back to what he actually can do. By doing this, he actually empowers Linda's own discernment rather than creating this unhealthy dependency. Saying no in this moment was an act of profound love and real integrity.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative reflection question. How might guilt or fear make it harder for you to say no in mentoring relationships? Take some real time to examine your own heart on this one. Boundaries protect the sacred space of mentoring. They ensure that your care remains sustainable, fully Christ-centered, and deeply honoring to God. Thank you so much for joining me for this lesson overview. Keep building those beautiful protective fences out there, and I'll see you in the next explainer.